Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far, and thank you to MCAD for welcoming me to talk to you about a subject that is extremely close to my heart, so much so that, hey, I've dedicated my career to it. So we're here today to learn and discuss embracing neurodiversity and how building an inclusive future in the technology industry is going to look and why we've got to strive towards it. So who am I? Why am I here today? And why am I talking to you? I'm here for ducks. If anyone has got any ducks, I did put one up there. So I actually found 6 of them and one black duck. One black duck, which is in the shape of a Bluetooth earpiece. So if anyone is missing it, I am holding it ransom for a glitter duck, apparently. I will be handing it in to the blue t-shirt people down at the front. So who am I? I am head of neurodiversity in cybersecurity research and consulting. It is a mouthful, and what does it mean? I come from the cybersecurity world. I actually started my career in the Ministry of Defence and the Royal Navy, and I started in electronic warfare, moving into cyber warfare. Really interesting times in my life, actually. And being a young carer for my brother with Asperger's, I was also very attuned to what neurodiversity looks like and how to support it. And when I moved into the world of cybersecurity and working with more technical people, I started to notice a change, and that the characteristics started to be more seen. And I started to fit in more a little bit as well. I then left the military to become a parent. I became a mum for the first time, and navigating motherhood with a child with autism and ADHD. My child was nonverbal up until the age of 5, my son. Now he is in training for Team GB at the very young age of 12 already. He goes to a mainstream school. He relies on technology for support. And I have built my career on focusing on the research part of understanding how neurodiversity plays a part, particularly within assistive technology and in cybersecurity posture. And I support employers and organizations, councils and further education in understanding neuro-inclusion. What does that word mean? And how do we be more neuro-inclusive? So let's start breaking it down by what is the word? Some people don't even know what the term neurodiversity means. Simply put, it means that we as humans all think, learn, process information and our environment differently. And those differences are a natural form of human variation. Much like we have different eye color, hair color, skin color, our brain neurotypes are also a variation. What's considered neurodivergent? Here is a non-exhaustive list of some of neurodivergence. Some of them you may be more familiar with or recognize, and some of them, mainly autism. When we think of neurodiversity, we think it just means autism. But actually, neurodivergence means that a way that an individual, again, behaves, learns, reacts to environments or communication, if that is different from what we accept socially as neuronormative, then that deems that person to be neurodivergent. There may be some other conditions that you may have heard more about recently, particularly ADHD. So let's look at some of the statistics. By the age of 10, a child with ADHD is likely to receive 20,000 more negative messages. Those messages being, why can't you just apply yourself? Try harder. Why can't you just remember to brush your teeth? And they're received from their closest and family members and teachers alike. Now imagine what that's going to do to a child who is forming their social profile and their own psychology and periods towards poor mental health. It's thought that between 15 to 20% of the UK population is neurodivergent. That's what we know about. Those are the individuals that we have recorded or registered as diagnosed by NHS. that statistic is going to double next year. I'm going to give you a duck if I'm wrong. The Office of National Statistics reports that only 29% of adults with autism are in any paid employment, either full-time or part-time employment. That is the lowest statistic of all disability groups. And that 6 million people in the UK are thought to have dyslexia. Whether how severe or a typology of dyslexia or difficulty with dyslexic characteristics. And 65% of employees reported that they felt direct discrimination from their management whilst in employment, and this is a reason they did not tell their employer that they have a neurodivergent condition. All of these statistics have been taken within the last 18 months, and I do keep them refreshing, and all I've noticed is those statistics are either getting higher, and with the report into autism, it's getting lower. That more individuals can either be employed, but for such short periods of time, and they fall out of employment. Here are some research with some helpful QR codes. They are safe, I promise. That I thought maybe you could start to read on your own research. Some of them have obviously come from the cybersecurity side, but I found this, whilst preparing for this event, I actually found the bottom one in designing the mobile technologies for neurodiversity, and how our technology that we're designing for assistive uses without even realizing that that's what they're being used for. And what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for how the technology that you are developing and using can be used in other ways with a particular flair to neuro-inclusion. Now, elephant in the room. Everyone's neurodivergent now, aren't they? You hear it everywhere. And this is my response. Not that one, that one. And the reason for that is because if we look at this data, this is taken from the NHS, and this does look at autism, mainly because autism and ADHD are the two neurotypes that are gaining most traction for health funding budgets, if I'm honest. You can see that that data is rising. And this only looks at children. Why? Because it's only in the school age that we start to look for neurodivergence. Once that child grows up to be an adult, there is nobody to support them in recognizing, actually, you're displaying signs of autism, ADHD. Apart from your peers, your closest. But at that point, when you reach adulthood, you are so used to masking, and you are so used to slightly feeling ostracized, you're not quite sure, and perhaps have then developed co-occurring poor mental health. In fact, the statistic is quite scary. 787% rise between 1998 to 2018. That is the percent rising in how many individuals, young individuals, are being diagnosed autistic. Here you go. It's always been there. It's not that there's just been a rise. It's we haven't recognized what neurodivergence, or we haven't accepted what neurodivergence looks like. I love using this example because so often I hear people say, there wasn't all this autism back in my day, and you didn't hear, or ADHD was just poor behavior. It has always been there, but due to the way that we as a society now live and particularly learn and work, it's now showing more in negative characteristics, things that we socially do not accept. And where are we getting all the information from? I forgot to put TikTok up there because that's one of the main ones. So when I was little and I was poorly, my mum or my grandma used to get out this really big book. It was something like the Oxford Handbook of Medical Ailments. And I was diagnosed with measles, chickenpox, some sort of growth disorder, anything you can imagine, because, of course, you rely on the information given to you. Now we're in the information era. We get all of it everywhere and repetitively. But also, we're recognizing what neurodivergence looks like in adulthood. What does executive dysfunction look like when you are an adult? When you have to actually prioritize and someone isn't giving you those priorities in terms of put your socks on, put your shoes on, and still, lo and behold, the child does not put socks on, but does put their shoes on. So what does executive dysfunction look like as in adulthood? Top influences on social media are sharing their story. And that's why so many people now are sitting up and saying, that's me. I didn't know the struggles I faced actually had a name. And where's it not been seen in history? Why haven't we had people, mainly our parents, from learning that our differences weren't in fact something to be ashamed of? Well, that's because they were. Unfortunately, society has made us that if we act differently, then that's shame. You're different to us. The way you behave is not accepted. Whether that was learning in a different way or acting in a different way, if you were social in a different way, and goodness forbid, if you were a female and you went to go and pick some herbs in the woods because you would find your feet very hot very quickly. But you were ostracized and you were outcasted and you were then identified that you were different. Now, humans, we're not great. We're not the greatest species. We don't have hard shells that cover our body. We're not really fast runners and have razor-sharp teeth. So we take after penguins, and we like safety in numbers. And that rejection means that actually it's a scary thing. And we still carry that forward now. We want to be invited. We want to be accepted because we see it as a safety thing. So the scare of being ostracized and made different, that's where the masking comes in. And that's where the hidden neurodivergence plays a part. And one thing I have had said to me many times, when my son was going through his diagnosis, well, you don't want to label him. Well, it was pretty hard not to. It was very obvious for my son being nonverbal and with his characteristics. But you don't want to label them. And you hear this about children in education. Oh, you don't want to label them. Don't label them as being that kid. And you can see, I never know if this is a girl or a boy, because they used to wear dresses. So this small child is stood in a stress position on a stool, young child, and what's on top of their head is called the dunce cap. It is a way of identifying that child that they're not either learning or behaving in the right way in a learning environment. This doesn't look like a school. This looks like a very possible posh house where they used to homeschool their children. But it's a way of, one, punishment, and two, identifying you as different for not learning properly. Learning properly also meant writing with your left hand. That was a sign of the devil. My daughter is left-handed. But why don't you want to label them? What's wrong with the labeling? There's my label. I'm autistic and I have ADHD. And that label is a clothes label. Not literally. However, like a clothes label, it gives very specific instructions, or I can give you very specific instructions. Now I understand my neurotype individually, what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And when things aren't working for me, I know how to get myself out. And that's taken a lot of work, self-guidance, acceptance, and advocating for my own needs, and that I advocate for other people. So labeling is a good thing, because we're woolly jumpers living in a 90 hot wash at the moment, and we're shrinking, and we're not going to be, unfortunately, fit for purpose if you keep us there. So let's take a look. I want to ask, just raise of hands, are you or do you know someone or related to anyone who's neurodivergent? Okay, lower your hand if that person is an adult. Okay, so mostly children. We see that. Now what I would like to point out here is those children are going to grow up one day. And if the need for neuro-inclusion ever is now, is that in 5, 10 years' time, those children are going to thank us for paving the way. Actually, by the year 2025, 35% of our workforce is going to be Gen Z. I never know which one it actually is. That scares me. I thought I was the young one being a millennial, but apparently not, and it all comes down to what socks you wear, I've learned very recently. So let's take a look. What does neurodivergence look like? Can you give diverse perspectives? Can you look at situations or strategy or problems differently and ultimately come out with a better outcome? And then I knew it would take too long, and I did only have 35 minutes, so I just bunged all of these up at once. And helping you to just read through and maybe recognize, I've got some of those characteristics, so I'm good at that. Or do you have people in your teams that you recognize these amazing qualities? The innovative. When I say creative, I don't just mean, yeah, they can draw a great dog. Creative thinking, again, we can look at that. Innovative thinking is looking at ways we hadn't otherwise thought of. A great example of dyslexia and creative thinking. Dyslexia doesn't just mean that you can't read or write particularly well. It does mean that you have trouble in understanding the tone. So the tone of language can be difficult. And actually, in languages such as Arabic, or ones that focus on phonics and sound, dyslexia isn't picked up as much. So it's actually a language problem rather than a literacy. But also, a dyslexic thinker thinks in 3D. So if you're going to get an architect, maybe look for a dyslexic one because of their visionary way of approaching problems. Others that we are more familiar with, the pattern recognition, the detail orientated. Logical and analytical thinking, deep focus. Did anyone see me actually hunting for those ducks earlier? I was in the zone. That's my neurotransmitters. It doesn't matter that I actually was hunting for ducks. It was just the dopamine in hunting for a duck. Attention to detail, honesty, the loyalty to do the right thing. It's actually quite funny because behind technology being the highest industry with neurodivergent workers, the next one is law. And then you've got engineering coming in, actually pretty much next to law. We find a lot of neurodivergence in the engineering space. And one that is a common misconception is empathy. A lot of people think because, and particularly with autism, because we struggle reading social cues and facial recognition on, I've gone very loud all of a sudden. Was that supposed to happen? Sorry. So because we have trouble in reading some social cues, some people think, I'm not very empathetic. No, we just have trouble in distinguishing whether that rhetorical question was a question, and that sarcasm will always get an answer from me. Don't quite pick up on that one. It does mean that we struggle in reading intentions, but it also means we can read intentions because of that pattern recognition isn't just dots and dashes, it's changes in behavior and picking up on things that otherwise can go unnoticed with other social characteristics. And of course, a strong sense for justice. Basically, I'm in Hufflepuff. But with that, with recognizing all of those fantastic strengths that we need, also come with an appreciation that it comes in peaks and troughs. And if we give too much, then we can start to see some of these. Every neurodivergent person is different, and not anyone, regardless of any neurodivergence they're given, my label or ADHD. Difficulty with social interaction. I've made loads of mates out there. It doesn't mean that I find social interaction difficult. What it does mean is sometimes I don't know when to stop talking, and I don't often pick up on social cues when it's my turn to talk. So what's the interpretation of social interaction? And difficulty with communication doesn't always mean they don't know when, but it can do. It's very much down to the individual. You met one person with autism, you met one person with autism. And the problem with neuroinclusion is focusing on that diagnosis. It needs to be met with individual needs. And here comes where we understand the term, I'm a little bit autistic. It's not a linear, really autistic here, and now I'm just what we would say normal down here. Maybe somewhere in the middle. That's not how it works. I call them my cat catchers. It's a little, is it going to work? It's a little light. No, it doesn't, unfortunately. How a diagnosis is met is we all share characteristics. So when I put those lists up, we can all say, yeah, I have that. Oh, I have a little bit of that. And this is where that, oh, everyone's a little bit neurodivergent. No, we all share characteristics. For example, some of us don't like eye contact. I find it the weirdest thing in the world. It feels like you're just looking right through me. I will do it because guess what? It's more uncomfortable for you than it is for me. For me to not give someone eye contact, some people do this, and they try and get my eye contact, or they think I'm just being rude. So as a social etiquette, I'm going to give you eye contact, but guess what? It's at my expense. Some people just don't like it. It's just a preference. Anxiety. We all have states of heightened or lowered anxiety. This doesn't mean, oh my gosh, light bulb moment. I've got ADHD and autism. Oh, I have trouble spelling Mississippi. I'm dyslexic. No, we have spiky profiles. And it is the severity on that we don't have it at all that grants you that diagnosis. And how are we accepted? How many people think, oh, that's your superpower? Autism is a superpower. We have seen it everywhere. Anyone familiar with this chap? He's fantastic. He's actually a non-verbal autistic person. Or person with autism. It's very much down to the individual in how they identify. Put them up in a helicopter, drive them around a city they have never been to, and they will draw it to scale completely. This drawing is London, and he actually drew the whole of London going round, and it was an art exhibition. Other examples, and I've had to put 3 up, because this is generational. I said Rain Man to some people once, and they hadn't got a clue who I was talking about. Blew my mind. However, these are traits of what we are now seeing with autism. Sheldon Cooper seems to be quite a one in the middle at the moment. And Mr. Robot, feeding back into that media representation that if you wear a hoodie, if you're a man, you have to be white. But ultimately, you've got to be autistic. Congratulations, you are a computer hacker. But for us to be accepted in society, it's like we have to own that superhero badge, that we have these phenomenal abilities. No, stop painting us to be superheroes. Yes, we do have fantastic qualities, but you do need to accept what makes us have those fantastic qualities. Being neurodivergent does mean facing unique challenges, many of which you may not have even recognized to be challenges. Some of us are at that top of that glass ceiling of capacity before we've even got to work in the morning, through traveling, through navigating if there has been a missed train. Yesterday, I was in London. I work in London quite a lot. You'd think I'd know what I'm doing. I wear noise-cancelling headphones because the tube is just screechy. And I got on the Circle and District line, if anyone's familiar with that. Basically a big loop. I just got on the wrong way. So for me, I count stops because I have my noise-cancelling headphones on, and I get off on my 7th stop, and I am nowhere near Bank. But that threw me. It threw me so much that I actually started to go into meltdown. What does that look like? I started stimming, which is stimulation by movement. Pen clickers, hold your hands up, leg shakers, I see you. They're acts of stimming. And what that is, when you are in overwhelm or excitement, your body is releasing extra cortisol, the stress hormone, or dopamine, the happy hormone. And your brain doesn't quite know what to do when you get too much of that. So it basically flushes it out. And the way to flush anything out is either through, you're going to get an extra blood, or you're going to get some extra water in you, but not that quickly, so you shake it off, put some Taylor Swift on. And that's what stimming is. Stimming, for a lot of people, is recognized by hand movements. It can be tapping on the face. Some people twiddle their hair, pull their hair, or extra feeling and motion. So there are barriers. Here are the main barriers that we're going to find within our organisation. Your first one, recruitment. Interviewing. Personally, I don't find that a barrier. Maybe it's like the duck challenge. I find it quite a unique challenge. But for many, it can be. But guess what? I'm still autistic after you hire me, and 6 months down the line, if I'm not supported, that's when we're going to start to see the problems. So it's that onboarding, networking. I mean, I am looking forward to tonight. I think it's going to be a good crack. But I know many neurodivergent individuals who would not be able to cope with traditional networking opportunities. Ongoing professional development for your managers and your leaders. Because it's all well and good starting to be neuro-inclusive, but then your managers and your leaders go in, I have no idea how to support this person. Managing neurodiverse teams, and trust me, I get this from my manager a lot, can be tricky. Here are some of the examples of where you can start to support internally. Your social interaction. What are the social barriers that you have? How do you socialize? Or how do you talk to each other? What does your meetings look like? And do you demand videos on? Is it because some of us don't have our video on because we look awful, we're definitely still in our pajamas, and we're doing 21 things at once in a meeting that really could have been an email? But could it be a social barrier for some? To be neuro-inclusive, we do need to think of it being intersectional. Neurodiversity is intersectional with many other diversity initiatives. For example, there is a crisis in the UK at the moment that if you suspect you are neurodivergent or your child, good luck in your 3 to 7 year wait on the NHS, unless you are fortunate enough to be able to pay for that private diagnosis. But it's not just a private diagnosis you're forking out for. And this is why I disagreed with that Panorama documentary. No one, unless they are absolutely certain they are neurodivergent, is going to cough up £1,500 just for someone to tell them, but then additionally pay 250 quid a month for medication because we're at a shortage. I have to medicate myself. I take lethamphetamines, means I can't take my medication to certain countries in the world because ultimately it's an amphetamine. We have seen in media, anyone ever watched Desperate Housewives? There was an episode where one of the characters, Lynette, stole her ADHD son's medication because it made her do things quicker. You see it in uni halls, people dishing out Ritalin. They call it Adderall, we call it Ritalin. Because it can make the non-ADHD brain go quicker. It works as an amphetamine. For me, it makes me be able to actually socialize on a good level, slows me down. Before I go to bed, I have an espresso. Why isn't this working? It's broke. Anyone know why? Tech, help. Well, tech, come up here and quickly help me. I'm just going to talk about the next slide, which is terminology. So how do you address neurodiversity? Let's just talk. We're all neurodiverse. We all have different neurotypes. Thank you. No?
Is the clicker still working? Can we try it?
Yay, yay. Terminology. So let's just start with the real basics. We're all neurodiverse. I'm neurodivergent. Other terms included in that, neurotypical. What's normal, what's typical, what we have societally built as accepting. Neurodivergent and neurominority are the same in that some individuals don't see themselves as divergent, we're just the minority, and I accept that. Neurokin, my mates, a bit like me. Autistic, everyone else who's not autistic. Neurodistinct, this is quite a new one, I always feel quite posh when I say this one. And my ultimate favourite is neurospicy. We're all a bit neurospicy. So we are all neurodiverse. And at some times in our life, I can guarantee you, all of you will be neurodivergent. Here are some examples. For the women, ultimately you will go through menopause. one of the 27 menopausal symptoms is brain fog. During brain fog, you will forget the word for cup. Also, when a woman goes through the menopause, or a female, sorry, goes through the menopause, you will have a 79% increase of cortisol, which will heighten your anxiety and your acceptance. You will be able to sit in meetings and suddenly, not only will you start getting really, really, really hot all of a sudden, but you will suddenly have an anxiety attack. Coupled with the brain fog, 980,000 females a year leave the workforce as a direct result of menopausal symptoms, with most of them being recorded to the brain fog and the heightened anxiety. Another example I like to give is grief. Unfortunately, we will experience grief in our lifetime. And for those of you that have, did you grieve for longer than 6 months? Or are you all just over it now? Because if you did grieve for longer than 6 months, then under the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual, you then have persistent complex bereavement disorder, because you cannot grieve for longer than 6 months. Then you can go to a GP, you can get some antidepressants, SSRI uptakers, before you even get access to talking therapy. And that is an act of neurodivergence, and accepting that grief can actually alter how you feel, how you communicate, and ultimately how you show up to be your best self. Here's your takeaways. What are you going to do? What shall you do? Contact your HR. Do you actually have a neurodiversity policy, or is it hidden in disability and DE&I, which it mainly is? If you're going to start a neuro-inclusion journey within your organisation, what do you want to know and why, and what are you going to do with it? Because if you're willing to ask people for a protected characteristic and they tell you, unless you are adequately supporting that person, you're going to find yourself in a court very, very quickly. The implementation of neurodiversity passports, looking at individual needs, and everyone gets one, not just the neurodivergent folks. And also, just because, yeah, you know what, us neuro-spicy lot, we do come with some fantastic qualities. Don't just look to recruit us, because I guarantee you've already got a neurodiverse team. And using technology. Using technology, and some of which I've put down here. I was meant to say speechify. I have Gwyneth Paltrow read my books to me. It's quite fun. And text. I use Microsoft Copilot to help me with executive dysfunctioning, figuring out what I need to do, how long I need to do it, and what I need to do next. Teams workrooms, because we all often work remotely. Sometimes having a drop-in where you can see someone else's face helps you. Doobie is a body doubling app, much like the Teams. Motion helps you by prioritizing, and my ultimate favorite is ChatGPT. You put in what you need to do when you need to do it by, and it will give you realistic deadlines. But ultimately, do the best that you can in the place that you are, and just be kind. You've got 1 minute, 27 seconds. Are there any questions? Thank you.
You do have a question from Hoover, actually.
Okay.
So a question from the audience is, do you think devices, iPads for example, exacerbate ADHD? Is it a good idea to limit device usage in people's early years?
So what I have focused on in Portsmouth, so as much as my big long title, the head of neurodiversity, I'm actually the cybersecurity lead for the Portsmouth Education Partnership. And that's using digital technology across our city in how to utilize technology for an area which a lot of our children live below the poverty line. The use of technology with ADHD are prone to lack of dopamine. They're in dopamine deficit, meaning that they like things to be fast and thick and be filled into their neurotransmitters. We are also unfortunately plagued with getting addicted. That can look like self-addiction with gambling, substance misuse, and the big one that I'm focusing on in the project in Portsmouth, and I want to try and amplify across the whole of the UK, is technology addiction. I believe we're at a crisis point with technology addiction with our youth. in how we are using technology, our relationship with technology, with our use. Do I think it exacerbates ADHD? I think it exacerbates the need for dopamine because you're always looking for the next thing. I do think it needs to be used with careful consideration. However, I'm still sitting in the advocate camp that technology helps neurodivergence in so many ways. And it can help with ADHD, but is it the babysitter that we have started to use it for? Unfortunately not, because it is going to heighten those characteristics, the negative characteristics, through technology addiction. Hopefully that answered that question.
Do we have any more questions from the live audience? We've got time for one more.
I'm going to do a very, very quick, dreaded, not so much a question as a comment, but I'll put it in Hoover. Steve Quirk, who is here doing another talk, did a really good one on accessibility in IT in general last year. So just for any of you interested in that, he also based that on a talk by his colleague at ThoughtWorks, Sarah Michelazzo. But anyway, I'll put details in. My actual question is, what advice would you have, whether it's just as people or if you're already a team lead or manager, for getting buy-in from senior management for support, especially those, well, not everyone, but maybe partly a generational thing for people who just don't quite get it?
Yeah, so we have to think of who we're talking to, and when we are talking to anyone board level, we have to focus everything on ROI. Why should we do this? Because DE&I is recognised, but it's never accepted. It's recognised but not accepted. So let's just go down the legal path. If a person was to tell you their protected characteristic of neurodivergence, it's protected under employment law that you have to offer reasonable adjustments and not discriminate against them. So it's within their organisational, social, corporate responsibility, they have to give support. But also with the rise of individuals recognising neurodivergence, it's only going to, those requests are going to start becoming more. If anyone wants to connect with me with regards to that and have some feasible letterheads or options, connect with me either on LinkedIn or on my email. And also, if you're not comfortable to ask a question while I'm up here, because this is a sensitive subject, my inbox is open. But for advice on how to do that, ROI, legal obligation. I'm 2 minutes 54. I have time blindness. I knew this was going to happen. So sorry.
That was a fantastic session. One more round of applause for Holly, please.